In this tutorial, what we're going to do is take a look at now producing a complete game using all the different tools and techniques that we've learned over the previous lessons. So before we can start and get too far with this, what we're going to need to do is just pick up a few different assets that we can use to produce the game with. So I'm going to use a slightly different template file to start today to the ones before, but all the same elements are effectively there. It's just got a few more blank spaces in it to help you make some progress with it. So let's right click on here, and I'm going to go to Save Link As, and I'm going to be popping this today over in my H drive in my computer science folder, Year 9, PyGame, and I'm going to save that in there. So that's called PyGame Stages Template. I'll probably just leave it called that, I think that's fine. So I'm going to save that one. What we're also going to need as well is we're going to use some graphics and some sounds in our particular game. So I'm going to come here, right click on this sound file, save that. That's the sound of a laser being fired. And actually I'm going to stick that in this images folder just so it's tucked out of the way, and I'm going to save that. Make sure you leave the file names alone. And we also want some sprites, so I've got a nice background image here for my balloon popping game, so I'm going to save that. So again, right clicking, save as, it's actually the Bourne Town Hall, save that one. And one more as well, which is a sprite, which is going to be a balloon as we do our balloon popping, and I'm going to save that in here as well, also in the images folder, so that's in there as well. It's called B1. Smashing stuff. So let's think for a second about what we want to achieve. In my game, when it's all done, what I envisage is this, and I've written it down here as well to help me think about it. Now, 3 different states in my game. The first one is what you call your splash screen. So you see these in most games actually as they initially first load up. Normally it might tell you the name of the studio that's designed the game or the developer, something a little bit like that. And so we'll have an image eventually, that'll be part of one of your badge tasks. There'll be a title, maybe some instructions. And we'll have to also make sure, because it might be our second or third game that we're playing on the trot, that we can reset some variables. Like, for example, they're going to have a score, an idea of how accurate they are, and also to make sure the timer's been reset. That's our first state. The second of our states that we're going to need is the state for when you're actually playing the game. So that'll handle the balloons appearing at random locations, our ability to then click on them, playing a sound when you click on them, drawing a new balloon, all that. And then finally the game over state. So eventually, once you run out of time, we'll then need to be able to tell the player how they've done, show them their average distance from the target they were shooting at, and give them the ability to start a new game. So let's get cracking, let's get coding and starting with this. I think it'll be quite nice. So I'm going to have to load up my code first of all. So getting into Pycharm, when it first loads up, you're going to go File, and then you're going to go Open. And quite often with Pycharm, it's going to try and point you to some path that will be pre-populated here, probably on your C drive as well. Not very helpful, that. So do make sure that when you're going to go in, that you're going into your H drive, then into your computer science. Computer's getting ahead of itself. Year 9 and computer science, Year 9, and then PyGame, and you can see all the different files that we've done in previous lessons down here. And the one we're doing today is this stages template there. Double click on that. So after a few seconds the code will load up. To make life a little bit easier for me, what I'm also going to do is turn on line numbers. So I'm going to right click in this empty space here, turn on show line numbers, because it'll make it easier to see where the code wants to go. And we might spot a few elements of this that we recognise from previous code. We're importing a few things, so we're bringing in PyGame, this mixer, that's so we can bring in some sound. System, because it's going to give us access to, I think, files in this case, random and some maths, like we've used before. Also got a couple of functions that we're using. There's the text drawing function, we've used that before, and we're able to say what message we want, send in an XY position, and send in a colour. We've got the Pythagoras theorem calculator that we use to detect accuracy. Again, all familiar elements from previous iterations of the program. I'm just folding these up temporarily just to make it a little bit easier to read. So the first thing to do then is to handle the initial game setup, and we're going to add a little bit of code into here. So I'm going to grab my lump of code, which is this stuff, and I'm going to pick that up and paste it in place, and then we'll look at actually what those individual parts are doing. So I'm just going to do some copy, keyboard shortcut, Control and C. And looking at this screenshot here, I can see this code is going to end up just before the game loop. I'm not sure if these line numbers are going to be quite accurate, but they certainly won't be far off. Just before the game loop, here we are. So I'm going to paste that in there, keyboard shortcut, Control and V, There it is. Let's take a look at what we've actually got here then. So it looks to me like we're setting up some variables. Can you see this? So we're saying the font name we want to use will be Arial. You could change that if you wanted to. We've got our background, BG background image is going to be the picture of Bourne Hall. You've got player 1, that's you, the image. That's going to be a crosshair. You might recall we've used that in previous lessons. If you don't have that already in your H drive, you might want to go back to lesson 8 or 7, I think 8 actually, and you'll be able to pick up another copy of that. We're going to load up our target image, that's our balloon. We're going to load up our sound of our laser cannon. So it's all dealt with here, because once it's loaded, and we won't need to do it again. The other thing we're doing after that, because our images could be any size, is we're going to recycle the size of player 1 to make sure it's a specific height and size that we want. And we're going to make sure it's exactly how I want it to be, and do the same thing also with the target. So this is the targeting reticle, which is roughly square, and this is the picture of the balloon. So we're getting all of our graphics all ready to go. And our first target position, our first balloon when we start a new game, is going to be sat at 500 pixels across, 500 pixels down. So that's what we're saying at the moment. So all those variables coming together, ready to work. Okay, let's look at the next lump of our code we're going to need. Is going to be our splash screen. Remember, that's what we talked about, it getting ready to start a new game. And so all we're going to do in here is, again, each time we start a new game, we're just going to set a few things up. So we're going to work out how long the program's been running for, and then we'll use that to establish how long the player gets to play their game from. We've got this variable called fire lock. You might remember from a previous lesson, we wanted to make sure that the player can't just hold their finger on the mouse button and just keep moving over the balloon targets without having to click, so that's going to help us deal with that. We're setting their score back to 0 so they don't cheat and build up a huge score. And then we've got these two things here which we haven't really talked about before. These are going to be things called lists. That comes in on the badge task later on, but it's going to tell you a few things about how many times you've hit the target and how far away we were when we did it. We'll do it later. So let's pick those up and copy. Boink, Control C, and these ones in question, these need to go in the game state for the splash screen, the pre-game state. And you can see here, look how these have been pasted in. They're going to sit here just under the line that says game state equals playing, this one just here. Okay, you'll notice as well they're indented, so we're going to have to make sure that we match the indent on our code, otherwise it's not going to work. So let's scroll down and see if we can find that part of the code. Okay, here's my game state splash down here. There's that indentation down here, so this code's going to disappear right here where it says add code here. There it is. I'm just going to hit enter, and I'm going to do Control V to paste, and you can see I'm just going to fix this indentation. So I'm coming back here using the tab key just above caps lock. I'm going to push it once and twice, next line once and twice, next line once and twice, next line once and twice, nearly there now, and these two, and these two. There we go, just like that. Good. So that's those ones done. So each time I'm in the splash state of my game, these are the things that will happen over and over and over. So effectively, we're just waiting for someone to start a new game up. All right, let's move on and look at what's next. Let's actually handle playing the game itself. So the code for this is admittedly a little bit more complex, but again, always remember, even when there's a lot of code on the screen, all that can ever happen, it goes across the way, look as well, all that the computer can ever do, and all you should ever try and do, is think about one thing at a time, about what each individual line does, and I'll whip through some of these in a second. So let's grab that code, let's make sure we put it in the right place. So you will see, as you're looking on here, it actually gives you a thing that says if game state is playing, your code starts here. We're going to pop it there, around about line 71. So let's go and pop this in place and make sure it's all indented correctly. Okay, here we go. Playing that code here, paste. Pop. I'm just going to hit enter just one more time just to give me some empty space. Okay, so looking on here then, indentation wise, this looks pretty good. It's all been indented correctly for me. I think that's Pycharm helping me out a little bit, so that's really, really nice. And let's just take a second here and look at what the lines of code do, see if we can pick out any of them. So screen fill with black, I think we've seen that before, that was one we already got. Mouse set visible equals false, so what that's doing is it's telling us that we don't need to see the mouse pointer. It would spoil the effect a little bit if you've got the targeting reticle with a mouse pointer dead center on it. What we're then doing is we're going to load the background image, that's our picture of Bourne Town Hall, and we want our picture to start in the very top left of the PyGame window, so that's a pretty good idea. The next line is then going to pick up the position of the mouse on the screen. What we're then going to do is we're going to draw our target, that's going to be our balloon, and we're going to draw that, I think we said that was 500 pixels across, 500 pixels down, so that's all we've done so far. We're then going to set up player 1's XY coordinates, which you might recall when we looked at making sure everything's all centered up. We look at the width of an image, we divide it by 2, do you remember doing this? And then you've got the X and the Y position, where it is that we'd like to draw the player's targeting reticle, so it tracks the mouse accurately. And we're then going to draw that targeting reticle on the screen, that's what we're doing here, like so. And then what we start to do is we look at how far it is, using Pythagoras, again all individual strands taken from other lessons, how far it is from the targeting reticle to the balloon. We then recreate something, again this is a direct copy and paste from before. We then say, right, if the player clicks the left mouse button and they've not been holding the mouse button down, alright, then what we're going to do is play our laser sound, that's all that does, that's playing a sound, turning that variable called fire lock on to stop us from cheating. And then what we're going to do is to see if player 1, the targeting reticle, is over the top of the target at the moment. Okay, and if we do happen to have that, then we're going to make the score go up. Then we've got this list that we talked about before, and again I'm going to talk about lists I think separately to this. And then what we're going to do is move on after that to hopefully draw a new target for the player to hit, and that's how this is going to happen. What else have we got on here? The other things we're saying that we'd like to do is we're going to be able to talk about how far away you currently are on the screen. We're going to talk about what your current score is, how much time you've got left to play the game as well. And what we're also going to do is we're going to say that if you've had more than 10 seconds of game time, then we're going to change the game to its game over state. And all these things just happen one after another, one by one by one by one by one, very, very quickly, thousands of times a second. Okay, let's look at the next bit then. We're almost finished now actually. Let's look at our game over state, which is down here. What are we going to do when it's game over? Well, if we scroll down a little bit, once we've finished the game, what we need to be able to do is just to sum up to the player how they did, tell them how many points they got, and give them the option to play another game. So that they know that they can't keep clicking, the first thing we'll actually do is we'll fill the screen up with black again. We'll bring the mouse pointer back so they can click one more time. And what we'll also do, which is quite a nice thing to do, is we'll show a little summary of whereabouts they click the mouse when they successfully hit targets. So you'll be able to see by the size of some big red circles how accurate you are. If you've got lots of little teeny tiny red circles, it means you're very accurate. If you've got lots of huge big red circles, it means that you weren't very accurate with the mouse. So that's pretty cool, isn't it, as well? And that's really what that's doing using lists. And we finally say that if you want to click the right mouse button, you can play the game again. And once they push the right mouse button, we go back to the splash state, the first one that we did. Let's pick that up and copy. And if you look very carefully on here, you'll see where this is going to go. It's going to go just under game state equals game over, about line 97. Let's go. So on mine actually it's about 108, so it's not a million miles away. So I'm coming in here and I'm going to do a paste, like so, and I'm just going to hit the enter key. For some reason, as he said, just looking at what I've got, I've actually got this text draw pair of lines. I've got them twice, so I'm just going to delete one of the sets of them. There we are, like that, just to neaten that up a little bit. Okay, so I've now got pretty much actually a full program. So I reckon we can now have a little go at running and seeing how we get on. I might have some errors. I'm hopeful it'll play first time, but if I have got some problems, we'll deal with them together. Here we go then. So run up at the top, and then run here, the Alt-Shift-F10 option. Let's go. And the program I'd like to run is this one. Let's try it. Okay, so here we go. Let's move this into the window a little bit. And let's click to begin. Okay, so here we go. Got one. Got one. You might want to turn your volume down, you know. and one more. Oh, okay, I just missed that. Okay, so let's have a look how I did. On mine, I managed to get in 2 shots before the time ran out. I got an average distance of 35 pixels from the target. I hit 3. Looks like one of my circles didn't quite render as it should. This one here, I was 38 pixels away from the center of the target. This one here, I was 36 pixels away from the end of the target. And if I right-click the mouse, I could play again, and it restarts the game. Lovely, isn't it? So, what's the badge tasks for you to do? Well, okay, let's take a look at those. The first of the badge tasks that you're going to do is I'm going to ask you to do a small piece of research. It won't take you very long. The way in which we store the players' moves, because if you remember at the end of the game we want to be able to draw the players' moves back to them. Those red circles represent how close you were to where you should have clicked. So each time a player scores, we actually store their X and Y coordinates of every single point that they've got. And a traditional variable where you say x equals 6 or your name equals Billy or whatever it might be, the problem with those variables is you can only store one thing at a time. And if you want to store lots of things at a time, like a bunch of different positions, you need to use something called a list. So what I want you to do is to open this link here in a new tab. It's a link to a Year 8 unit on AI that you've done previously. Have a little read through the example it gives. And then what I want you to do is in Notepad, just write a few words, nothing crazy, a few sentences about what a list is. You might be able to give an example. That would be a nice thing to do. Let's talk about the gold badge. For the gold badge, what I want you to do is to go and modify the splash screen a little bit. At the moment, it's a plain white screen. I'd like you to go online, find any image at all. I don't really mind what it is, nothing inappropriate, and change it from being plain white to an image. In the code, I've already talked earlier on about where the image was first loaded up, and then where the image was drawn. So let's see if you can do that, okay? And then finally, for the platinum badge, what I'd really like you to do is to take the game and to rework it. So go online and find a different sprite, find a different background, maybe find some different sound files, and see if you can splice those into yours. So you could change it to a Wild West scene with tin cans, with the sound of a shotgun, something like that instead would be really cool. Do remember, if you do pick up other images, you're going to need to make sure that for your targets, so if it was tin cans, like I was saying for example, if it was something like that, you're going to need to make sure you remove and create what's called an alpha layer to make sure the background's transparent. And again, if you look through the previous week's notes, there's a section on using a program called GIMP to do that. We worked on it with some Super Mario graphics, you might recall. Just a final word on that gold badge before I leave you, and that's just to say on the splash screen it'd be really nice as well if you could include some extra text, maybe some instructions of how to play the game. Something like that would be really cool. So, good luck, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.